Here we go once again with the Reentry Connect podcast. Yes, condemned to death by incarceration with Felix Rosado. Woo! We talk about a story. Yes, y'all in for one tonight. But without further ado, it's your host, Keenan Hudson. And you know, I have to give a little shout out to GPS Transportation 215-774-9913. Looking for a 5-star transportation company. They're the ones to contact. I'm telling you, they go everywhere from the party buses, wheelchair accessory, private transport. Even if you're coming from the airport, feel free to reach out to them. Again, one shout out to One Day at a Time, Mr. Mel Wells. We appreciate all the things you do in the community. You got to see he's one of the best organizations here in the city of Philadelphia. You need reentry support. You need recovery support. Yes, you reach out to them and they will make it happen. Yes, indeed. But yes, back to the show. Here with Mr. Felix Rosado, condemned to death by incarceration, but he's here on a podcast right now. Yes, you're going to ask and wonder, how was that so? But we have Mr. Felix Rosado here right now to share his story and how he never lost hope and how he came home and made a positive impact. So, Mr. Rosado, if you could go ahead and just introduce yourself and let the people know who you are.
First of all, thanks, Keenan. Thanks for having me. You know, I love your energy. You even bring it on the promos. So, just appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk with you, to share a little bit. Yeah, what was the question?
So who you are? Where you from?
Yeah, I'm from Reading, Pennsylvania, a city that's about an hour northwest of Philly. Spent 27 years at Graterford State Prison in SCI Phoenix, and now I live in Philadelphia, where I've been for the last year and a half, Southwest Philly.
Wow. Cool. So, Mr. Felix, if you could just go ahead and if you could get into, because I know you're home, you're free, you're doing well for yourself, but there was a life before that. How was your upbringing, the things you've been through? How was your life? What type of drama have you been through?
Well, my story actually begins in the early 70s when my grandmother migrated from Puerto Rico to Reading, Pennsylvania with her 16 children in search of a better life. She thought that, there was opportunity out here that her children weren't going to get on the island. And so we landed in Reading. For those who don't know much about Reading, it's one of the top 10 most impoverished cities in the country. Lots of crime, lots of poverty, and all the issues that stem from those, two things. And so, but I had a good childhood. My family was close knit. We spent a lot of time together. My generation started to sprout up in the late 70s. Have a lot of cousins. We did a lot of things together, and I was a good student. I was a straight A student. I was deemed gifted. Things were always good for me. And then somewhere around middle school, I started getting sucked into the streets, and unfortunately, I just wasn't able to pull myself out. Started with things like shoplifting. From there, jumped to breaking into cars and then stealing cars. And at age 14, I made my first drug sale, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the power, the money, the quote unquote fame, and quickly escalated up the drug game ladder. Started carrying guns, using guns, and at age 18, I went to prison for murder.
Wow. So, Mr. Rosado, so you just shared that you had a good childhood growing up. There was sort of nothing you really needed for. But at what time and what point did it change? Like, was there something drastic that happened in your life that turned you to the streets? Or was it just something you wanted to do because your peers were doing
it? Yeah. I mean, we had our basic necessities taken care of. Roof over our heads, meals to eat. But I wanted more. I wanted what I seen everyone else having, and we just couldn't afford that. So little by little, I started doing things I I was doing, and also what I used to see on my way to and from school started to intrigue me and fascinate me a whole lot more than anything that was happening in the classroom. And so little by little, I just got pulled into that.
You got pulled into that. Wow. So then eventually you said, okay, you wind up going to prison, charged with murder. Now here it was, you're still a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you weren't an adult. You know, you haven't really lived a life as an adult. So what was your mind facing at that time? Were you scared? Were you just feel as though, did you feel as though your life was just over with? Did you have any type of knowledge towards the law or anything?
Yeah. The answer to all those questions is no. I ended up in county jail, age 18, and had to figure things out quick, right? I didn't have a lot of time. I went through, I went through all the steps prior to trial, but I wasn't ready for what was jumping off in the courtroom. I had counsel that didn't represent me well. So anyway, long story short, I ended up getting convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death by incarceration, which is what I prefer to call life without parole. I prefer to call it by its true name. But at the time, I didn't know. So when the judge banged his gavel and sentenced me to life, I thought, like most people walking around out here think, that it meant 20 years, 15 if you behave. That was still a lot of time, but I thought that there was an end to it, though, at some point. And so by the time I got to Graterford, I saw men who had been there 35, 40 years. Back in the mid 90s, when I arrived at Graterford State Prison, we were still allowed to wear street clothes. So I still remember my first day on the cell block, and I asked my new cellmate, what's the deal with these guys with the bell bottoms and the humongous afros? And he said, well, he's such and such. He's been here 30 years, and the other guy, his name is such and such. He's been here 40 or whatever. I remember my heart dropped. I couldn't, my 18-year-old brain couldn't fathom a human being being in prison longer than I had been alive. But I tried to play it cool. I didn't want to seem naive or anything. But next day, I was in the law library trying to get this thing off me. And, I fought for my freedom every single day out of that whole 27 that I was there.
The whole 27. Wow. So you spent the whole 27 years.
Yeah.
Majority of the time at Gratisford.
Yeah.
Wow.
I left Graterford when it closed down in 2018 and went to the new prison that they opened up
over in Phoenix. So now during your stay there at the prison at Gratisford, because we hear a lot about I've been through Gratisford, I've been through the whole per se, and I could just imagine just being locked down a lot. But I know you were in population and things like that. But just tell us, how was that experience with you going from full home course meals, as a child out on the streets, to going to here eating a bunch of soups and summer sausages and things like that? What was the life? What was the experience like?
I still remember my first day at the Ford. I was with a few other guys. We had just come from Camp Hill. We were walking down that main corridor. At least 1,000 people were out there doing their thing, and we got walked over to E Block, got dropped off, and that was it. We walked a few feet. There was another CO there at the table. He dumped out a trash bag full of wrinkled brown uniforms and said, pick something that fits you, and just stepped off. That was our orientation, basically. So I found something, made my way up to the bubble, found out where I was going to be, and it took off from there. Graterford was really open at the time. It used to be said that the only thing you couldn't get there was a car. You couldn't drive. But everything else that you could do in society was going on in there. Just lots of violence, lots of drugs, and I tried to stay away. I tried to stay away from it at first, but before long, hopelessness started to set in. I started smoking weed again. Before long, I was up to my street habit, and just found myself in a lot of trouble, as I attempted to escape the reality of my situation. And so I found myself in and out of the hole, and I did that for about a decade. You know, uh, 90 days, come out for a few months, go back in. Got stuck in that whole cycle. And somewhere in my like mid 20s, I think I was like 27. I went down there for the last time, and I had what I like to refer to as my moment of awakening.
That's it. That's it.
And yes, I was sitting in that little cage all by myself, one afternoon, and I started asking myself some tough questions that I had never asked myself before. And I started thinking about my legacy. Like, what is this all going to mean when I'm gone? Is anyone even going to remember me? And then I asked myself, Keenan, how did I get here?
Wow.
How did I get from being a straight A student in elementary school to sitting in the furthest place from freedom a human being could be, being treated like an animal by the guards? And I traced my steps back, and I ended up in that alleyway across from my middle school, standing in that circle with those 3 other boys, smoking my first marijuana blunt. And I was able to identify that as the moment when my life took a serious downward turn. And so I decided right then and there that I had to make another turn, equally drastic, but this time in the opposite direction. So I decided that I had to stop getting high, first of all, and so I did that. I came out with a new focus. I got back into my law work. I had been out of court for 5 years. My first round of appeals ran dry. So I had nothing going on for the next 5. And so I started going to the law library. I started doing the work myself.
Yeah.
The first time around, right, I was paying people cartons of cigarettes to file my briefs, and they were messing my case up. This time I'm at a computer every single day for hours, reading case law until my eyes felt like they were going to bleed.
Wow.
And I didn't understand what I was reading at first. It was like Chinese, but I sat there. I read case law. If I didn't know a word, I looked it up in the Black's Law Dictionary. And little by little, I found my way back into court, long story short. And then I started to replace despair. And it really turned around after that. So I spent 2 years, just going hard with my law work and playing organized sports and working out. That's all I did for 2 years. And then I still felt like something was missing, though, And so I reached out to one of the chaplains. I ended up rediscovering the Catholic faith of my upbringing, started to go to church again. I got offered a job in the prison chapel, so I started working there. And then suddenly I found myself around positive dudes who were living, selfless lives, had purpose, and so they started rubbing off on me. And then a few of my coworkers in particular used to be part of this program, talking with boys from a nearby juvenile hall, St. Gabriel's. And so they used to bring groups of boys inside the prison to hear from a group of guys about what their lives could look like if they continue going down the paths that they were on. And so my coworkers, after attending these sessions every month, would come in and talk about it. And then it really started to pique my interest. Something, I started to feel called to do. But I had one problem. I had this huge fear of public speaking, and I didn't think I'd be good at it at all. So I was sitting in my cell, and the urge became so undeniable that I went over to the chaplain who ran the program and asked him what he thought about me participating. And he lit up. He said, yes, like, we'd love to have you. You're still kind of young. I was like barely 30 at the time. You're from Reading. You're Puerto Rican. Like, the boys are going to love you. So he said, look, all you got to do is show up the first time and observe. You don't have to do anything. Just chill, sit back, and if you feel comfortable, the next time you can go ahead and share. So I said, I could do that. And we're sitting in we're sitting in the visit room, circle of chairs. The boys start coming down. The staff people from St. Gabe's start coming down, and one by one, the guys stood up and started, doing their thing. And I remember sitting there trying to listen to these guys through the ears of the young boys, and I got a sense that they weren't really feeling what was being said. They were looking at the floor, they were looking at the ceiling, like they didn't seem engaged. And the guys weren't really talking their language. They were all like 50, 60 years old, had been in like 35. I had 12 in at the time. I was, I think I was either 29 or 30. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, this is a missed opportunity. Like something could be said here that could change the trajectory of these boys' lives that isn't being said. So anyway, the last guy, who I later learned always likes to go last, didn't know that I got these previous instructions to just chill. So he pointed at me and said, you go first. And so now the spotlight's on me. I could either make a big deal about how I was just there to observe, or I could just get up and start talking. So I did the latter before I could even convince myself out of it. And I just started speaking from the heart. I just started telling them, look, 12 years ago, I was in your shoes. I was in a juvenile detention center. I heard a lot of what you just heard today. But then I got out and I did this and I did this and I did this and I ended up in prison. And I talked about how it had been like for me for the last 12 years, fighting a death sentence from behind a wall. And by the end of it, I was pretty emotional. I looked at each of them in the eye. I went around that whole circle and I pleaded with them. I said, don't be me. Whatever you do, just don't be me. And I sat down. I'm my own worst critic, so I thought I stunk it up. And then the other guy goes, and then at the end, right, they all started coming over to me, with pounds and hugs, and I felt what you were saying, and that was real shit. And some of them wanted to exchange contact information with me, and some actually stayed in touch. Then the staff started to come over to me, and they were like, "Look, please come next month." They were opening up their notebooks and saying, "Look, I quoted you," and I couldn't believe it. Like inside, I was totally overwhelmed, Keenan. I was thinking cool, but in the inside, I was like, "Damn! Like, how did that just happen?" It made me realize that despite being behind a 30-foot high concrete wall, despite having been sentenced to die there, I could still have an impact on someone's life. So anyway, eventually we got out of there. We started walking down the corridor, and the older brothers were like, "Yo, I've been doing this for X amount of years. I've never seen anyone get a reaction like that before." And I finally got back to D Block, started talking to everybody who would listen, about it. Got on the phone. I called my mom. I told her a story, and then eventually I locked in for the night. And I was in a single cell, and I couldn't sleep. Like my adrenaline was flowing. I kept replaying the evening over and over in my head. And at some point I realized that I was happy. I was experiencing true joy inside that cage for the first time since I was a boy, and I also discovered my purpose that night. My gifts and my story and whatever I had to help as many young people as possible. And that was it. That launched me into a life of purpose and service I haven't looked back from. That was in 2007.
That's powerful. So that was a point where you first developed and saw that you had a gift, to advocate, to mentor, and to show people the example in which to be versus the person you used to be. So my question is okay, so you're doing your time, you get to that turning point where you came to your conscience, you came to your senses saying, hey, I have to do better. And it happened. So now my question is, when you filed the appeal and it was granted, because a lot of people go in, they get time barred, they go over their statute of limitations. But however, you say you were still in the fight, even though people was messing up your paperwork, you still had a chance. So once that thing was granted, what went through your mind and what was the feeling like? that you were going to be released?
That thing wasn't granted. I litigated an ineffective assistance of counsel claim for 9 years from PCRA to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they shot it down. Around the time that was getting shot down in the U.S. Supreme, the same U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional to sentence children to mandatory death by incarceration.
Yeah, it's true.
So even though I had missed that by 5 months, I was 18 years old in 5 months when I committed my crime. So I had missed that that ruling. But all my brothers around me were going home now. Dudes that I had been there with for decades. All of a sudden, we're getting resentenced and going home. Wow. We're there, and I eventually filed a new appeal, arguing that those rulings should also apply to me.
The
science that they're based on says that the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until the mid-20s. So I started making that argument, and I went up the ladder with it, all the state courts. I ended up in the Third Circuit. They granted me a hearing. Things were looking good. But then, our previous governor, Tom Wolf, came into office, and he commuted someone with a death by incarceration sentence for the first time in like over decades.
That's unheard of.
The door had been completely shut on that process for 2 decades and some change, because of something that happened a year prior to my arrest. Didn't have anything. But anyway, once he did that, I was like, by this time I had something in the courts. I was also part of a growing movement to abolish death by incarceration. I'm a founding member of a group named Right to Redemption, and we came together with a few other groups to start the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration, CADB. So we're working to try to get the law changed so everyone could have parole eligibility. So I was fighting in those 2 areas, and then all of a sudden I said, you know what? Let me try this as well, because you got to try it all. I was trying to escape, that sentence, and so I started working for about a year on my application. Finally put it in 2017. It took 3 years for it to finally go in front of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons. By that time, Graterford had shut down, and we got moved to SCI Phoenix. And so in 2020, I got granted a public hearing. So anyway, for those who don't know, in order to receive commutation of a death by incarceration sentence, you have to go through the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons, and they're a 5-member board. And so you have to get at least 3 out of 5 votes to get a public hearing. And then once you get the public hearing, now you need all 5 of them to go to the governor's desk. So it's a long, hard process. It's near impossible. It's set up that way. And I got the 3 out of 5 to get the public hearing. But then when I went to my public hearing in September of 2020, I got the same 3 out of 5 votes. At this point, I needed all 5, and I got denied. And I was devastated. My family was devastated. We had gotten our hopes up. I was the youngest person to even get that far. All the people who were getting commuted prior to me, and it wasn't many, a handful or whatever, were like over 65, had 35 years in, were the non-shooter in a felony murder second-degree case. So that kind of became like the unwritten standard of who was going to get it. And I didn't fit any of those categories, not even close. So I knew that it was going to be a long shot, but I put it in, first time got denied. And then in 2021, I filed for reconsideration. That got denied too.
Wow.
And then, towards the end of the year, I was about to file a whole new application. And so it would have taken me 3 years to get to where I just was. And then I heard about someone who had attempted a second reconsideration request. I didn't even know that was possible. It didn't go anywhere, but it let me know that, this is a thing. So I started working on grounds for a second reconsideration request. I got a letter from the state senator. My district attorney wrote a support letter for me,
Mm-hmm.
and also I had 150 support letters
Wow.
prior. So that was still there. And then I got granted another public hearing with the same 3 out of 5 votes.
Wow.
And so I ended up going to that one in April of 2022. And this time I got 5 votes, my brother.
Got the 5 votes. Woo! They say right here, you got to Miss Donna Urban say right here, you never gave up.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, thank you, Donna. So like 3 months later, Governor Wolf commuted my sentence on July 14th, 2022. And then 4 days after that, July 18th, 2022.
Woo, 4 days you was out.
Yeah, free man. At the age of 18, at age 45.
Wow. So what was the feeling like coming home after spending so many years in prison throughout your late teens into your 20s, 30s? Now you're home. You're home. Yeah. Now you only been home for shyly over what, 1.5 years?
Yeah.
So now how's your adjustment been?
Yeah.
And I know you got a clear mind that started in there, but how's the adjustment been going?
Yeah, so I had been preparing for this. My mom always told me at the end of every phone call, at the end of every visit, see your freedom, son. Visualize it. It's yours already. Taste it, smell it, touch it. And I used to lay in that cell and visualize what my first day was going to look like, first week, first month, and it manifested. And I was also preparing by the things I was doing on the inside. I co-founded a restorative justice project. I was coordinator of Alternatives to Violence project. I was in leadership of a few different committees and organizations, and I became a certified yoga instructor. I was a hospice caregiver, so I was busy inside there. And Graterford was really unique because they allowed a lot of outside people to come into the prison. So I met a lot of all the volunteers for all my projects. I got a college degree while I was in there through Villanova University. So I connected with all.
So you utilized.
I had a big network of support before I even came out.
So you utilized all those connections and resources and the giftings that you received, the education you received, to come out here and utilize them out here in the world as well.
And let me be clear, Keenan, so no one out here gets this mistaken. Graterford was an anomaly. It's the only prison that had all these things going on. As you know, Keenan, it was Graterford and the mountains. Right? Everything else is called the mountains, and they don't have anything up there, right? No volunteers coming in, no college programs, no programs created and led by incarcerated people. Had I landed in some other prison, Keenan, I wouldn't be sitting right here talking to you right now. That's a fact.
I believe it.
So, and unfortunately, they closed down the fort, opened up Phoenix, and are trying to make that like the rest of the prisons around the state. Instead of trying to replicate what Graterford had going on, they wanted to shut it down and turn it into the rest of the mountains. So now the same opportunities I had aren't even available to people who are doing time now. But anyway, I just want to throw that.
So your experience, So
I came out to a big network of support. They put a few of us in a van and drove us to the halfway house on 8th and Willow, right off of Calla Hill. And my first steps of freedom were actually when I stepped off of that van. And at least a dozen of my folks were right there, holding signs up and waiting for me with the phones, and they were video recording it and taking pictures, and it was love. I hung out with them for like 5-10 minutes, and then I had to step in, had to do an orientation. I came out, and then we drove to this. Well, we drove to this church, and that's where the rest of my supporters were. At least 100 people were there waiting for me, and we just celebrated. And, it's been
a great journey. So let me ask you this: So what are you doing now for the community in your life?
Yeah.
How are things going? Like, how are things working out? What are you doing? Enlightening people.
So I started my current job a week after I got out, program coordinator of Healing Futures with the Youth Art Self-Empowerment Project. And we're a youth restorative justice diversion program. So we get referrals from the district attorney's office of young people who've been arrested for a variety of different things. We guide them through our program, and at the end of it, their charges get dismissed. It's as if they were never arrested, and they can go on with their lives, hopefully successfully, without the stain of a criminal record or the trauma of having spent any time in a cage. So that's what I do as my day job. A couple months ago, I started teaching two courses at Chestnut Hill College. So I do that one day a week, and I'm trying to bring my people home on the side.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
Coalition to abolish death by incarceration. We're organizing out here. We got a rally coming up April 9th in Harrisburg. Want to shout that out real quick. But yeah, I mean, I'm not until my people are free. I'm not free.
That's what's up.
So, the fight continues.
Fight continues. And let me ask you this: if you could motivate or inspire an individual right now with some motivational words, whether they're in prison, they're in a halfway house, recovery house, anywhere, what would it be?
Find your purpose. Everything turned around for me once I did. Doors started to open. People started to come into my life. I started, having a reason to wake up in the morning. It's a game changer. Find that one thing that you were put on earth to do, and it's different for each of us, right? We're all unique. We all have a gift that no one else on this planet has, and when you discover what that is and start using it for good, your whole life's going to change. Whether or not you were incarcerated, you just came home, or if you never had any experience with the criminal punishment system at all, that goes to anyone across the board. That's what I would say.
Powerful. We really appreciate that, Mr. Rosado. And if you could go ahead and let people know about the Let's Circle Up, just quick and briefly, and let them know how to contact you as well.
So Let's Circle Up is the name of the Restorative Justice Project I co-founded on the inside with Charles Boyd, who's in year 39 of his death by incarceration sentence. We're trying to bring him home. But we started this little restorative justice education workshop, and it just grew and grew and grew and turned into a whole project and then a movement. And, we just got our 501c3 status over the summer, and eventually, we're going to build it up out here. So that's the website, and my email address is, right there as well, if anyone wants to reach out. But yeah, so that's that. I also work for the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project. Check us out. We're online. We're on all the socials, and I'm on all the socials as well.
All the socials. What are you on all your socials as?
Felix Rosado, and my tag is Freeish at Freeish 2022.
Cool. And that's very powerful. So is there anything else you would like to share or enlighten people on in general before we end the interview today?
Well, brother, I appreciate you. I appreciate all you're doing, trying to shine a spotlight on, the good things that are going on out here. We don't see that on the news. There's a real disconnect, between, like what's going on and what people are seeing every day. They turn on their news. And we're just grateful for that opportunity. Just loving life, loving freedom, never taking a day for granted. And, at some point of each day, I realize that I'm free, and I don't take that lightly. I don't take any of it for granted. And I know that with that freedom also comes huge responsibility. I left a lot of people behind who deserve to be here just as much, if not more. So I carry that weight around too. And that's my life, man. I'm a homeowner. I'm engaged. About to be a first-time dad. Life is good. God is good. I'm just grateful, brother.
Yeah. And we do appreciate that, man, because you really enlighten a lot of people. And I'm quite sure that there's individuals that's watching, that's listening, that's really inspired. As you said, you was in jail, sentenced to death by incarceration, but you never gave up. You never lost hope. You knew that it was light at the end of that tunnel. But then not only that, but when you decided to change your life around, you did come home and you kept that promise to yourself. And not only that, but you've accomplished a lot of things that most individuals don't even accomplish in a lifetime. So I commend you on that, to keep focused and to constantly keep staying on the grind, constantly keep changing lives and helping others. Most people come home and forget where they come from. Most people come home and feel as though, they have a sense of entitlement because they've been in prison or been away for a while and think they're better than the world. Well, guess what, brother? We're just a wrong chance or a wrong second away from ending back into that prison cage. And most people don't, try to, they forget that. People forget 20 years and 20 minutes out here. So it's more so we have to constantly remind each other, constantly inspire, uplift each other, build each other up. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, we're all human. None of us are better than either. You know what I mean? We all have our ups and downs. We all have our, things that we have to work on. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people just think, we got all this public success. But how many people have private failures that they don't like to reveal? But there's so many things that I could go on and on about. But I've been blessed by this interview, and I appreciate you for coming on here, Mr. Felix Rosado. But until next time, now I hope to hear from you in the near future where we can have future roundtables and things like that. But I know that people that are watching, they really benefited off of this. But until next time, hey, be blessed. And like I said, it's only by the grace of our Creator, man, that we here today even to have this live interview. We appreciate it. Everybody take care and have a good night.